Little Archie, issue 119. Mealtime. I like that Sabrina's aunts are wearing a different color for once. It strikes me as unrealistic that they always wear the same black clothes in this comic. Because Zelda's tired, she doesn't feel like cooking supper, so Hilda decides to eat out. She tells Sabrina to use the witch phone to find out what the neighbors are having. That's the whole story? All that does is make me hungry. That's not much of a plot. There wasn't any conflict. But I'd take this short, harmless story over a lot of horrible plots where I'd be there all day. The story ends with Hilda's family flying to Veronica's house while Mr. Lodge gets told that Sabrina was taking a survey on what they were having for dinner. So why didn't she call Veronica's house first? It was obvious that the rich family might be having the tastiest food. Then the story could have been about Sabrina's family having dinner with the Lodges. Is it supposed to be a bunch of clever jokes that the characters are all eating the things they are? I don't see what's so funny about it. This story is about Sabrina using the phone to find out what the households of her various friends are having for supper. Which is an interesting idea on paper, but there's way too many panels focusing on what they have for food. And then the story ends with her family flying to Veronica's house because that's their idea of eating out. Which is smarter of them if it's something they're allowed to do for free. What made her witch phone different from any other phone? I guess because it wouldn't have a phone bill. Could you see them when she was calling them? The story should have been about Sabrina and her family having dinner with Veronica, because this wasn't much of a plot. Little Archie, issue 120. Laugh Boy Laugh. Archie asks Sabrina to write a page of jokes and riddles for the school newspaper while Reggie's sick at home. Jughead snarks musingly, he must have laughed at one of his jokes. Sabrina somehow wonders how Reggie knew that Sabrina could produce jokes like magic, even though she's been obvious about her magic for some time. Sabrina then decides to find jokes in Little Archie's mailboard. I hate fourth wall breaking. It's blatantly unnecessary and defeats the point of reading a story, which is to be immersed in another world. It makes me feel like the point where the comic started doing these way too often was the point where the writers were giving up, even though there were still good stories. I can assume that she got these from a parallel universe where there's a comic called Little Archie, but I hate that I have to assume that. So Sabrina cheats with magic to get Archie some papers, and Archie and Jughead aren't even confused when she tells them where she got them from. No one's laughing at the jokes, and they look mad because they're looking at a crossword puzzle. So Sabrina summons laughing gas to force everyone to laugh, and somehow they think the laughter is their idea instead of knowing better and being horrified. The story ends with Weatherby closing school because the kids laughed themselves sick. That only makes sense if the laugh gas was used too much. This story is about Sabrina being hired to write jokes and riddles for the school newspaper on Reggie's Drawn-a-Savvy recommendation. If there's one thing I love about him, it's that he knows Sabrina's a witch. And he's not obnoxious about it by constantly trying to expose her like in the 70s cartoon. Instead he's like I wanted him to be about it. She doesn't do a good job because she made people do a crossword puzzle. So of course they got mad. So she uses laughing gas, and it makes the kids laugh themselves sick. That was too dark of an ending. I assume that using too much of it can cause health problems, and they got sick because her magic somehow didn't make sure not to use a dangerous amount of it, when she didn't want them to get sick. Why didn't she magically make them want to laugh without laughing gas? It is realistic that a kid would be naive enough to not realize that too much laughing gas could be dangerous. Little Archie, issue 121. The Age of Youth. Sabrina asks Hilda if she's having batwing soup again tonight, with a smile. These comics make me wonder what batwings taste like. I hope they taste good so that the witches constantly eating them actually makes sense. I assume that the bats being eaten by witches are raised in safe, healthy environments, like farms, so they can't be diseased. Hilda's making a magic brew to keep herself young. She should say, to make myself young, because she wouldn't think she's young. Maybe she is compared to other witches? She says that a drink of these vitamins has kept her young and beautiful all these years. She'd only think she's beautiful if witches think ugly is beautiful, and that hasn't been confirmed yet. So far, it's just as likely that the ants are just vain. And most of the people she interacts with are probably mortals who would think she was ugly. So that would have affected her self-image. Hilda says that she's 369 years old. No, she's 213 years old. Apparently this is a parallel universe from that story, which would explain why the later stories have Merlin actually want witches to cause trouble. But that was foreshadowed with him letting Zelda off the hook because he got nostalgic for his pranking days. For once, Zelda's the one who has a level head, warning her that's pretty strong stuff, and yet Hilda takes the risk of drinking 2 drinks at a time to make it work quicker. Sabrina says she likes Hilda the way she is, and walks into a wall because she wasn't looking ahead. Zelda asks her if she's okay, thankfully, and Hilda pranks her at a time like this by shooting her with a water gun she must have zapped up. She's a kid now, but sadly it doesn't make her pretty. I already saw her be a kid in the 90s comic. She shoots Zelda with water and gets told to go to her room and says "aw" instead of being rebellious for some reason. Predictably, instead of anyone simply turning her back to normal immediately, it's gonna have her be a kid for the whole story. Somehow Zelda thinks she needs to fix some magic powder to turn her back to normal. I wish she explained that if she just cast a spell to do it, Hilda would turn back into a kid right away because the potion's still in her. And that's why she needs to make an antidote. Hilda decides to fly down to see the kids at the chocolate shop, even though that'd confuse them because they'd see a young Hilda. But Sabrina could pass her off as her kid cousin, who only looks like Hilda by coincidence. Zelda's surprisingly clever and plans on sprinkling the magic powder on a cupcake to get it in Hilda. Just like with Doorbell, cupcake is misspelled as being 2 words somehow. Jughead insults Hilda like an idiot, and she wants to get back at him. For no apparent reason, Hilda says she doesn't want a cupcake. Jughead eats it and becomes old. Sabrina cries, and then it turns out the whole thing was just a dream of Sabrina's from after she walked into the wall. Which doesn't make sense because you don't dream during a blackout. And if you were knocked out long enough to have a dream that long, you'd have issues from it for a while that she won't. And she just walked into a wall. The story ends with a "here we go again" ending because Hilda wants to take 2 drinks at once. I don't like those kinds of endings. I'd rather see Sabrina use magic to stop her. This story was about Sabrina walking into a wall and somehow dreaming about Hilda turning herself into a kid with potions and then somehow refusing to eat a cupcake for her. Sabrina could have used magic to make her want to eat the cupcake. I suppose the fact that her refusing to eat the cupcake makes no sense is justified because it's just a dream, but why would she dream after blacking out too easily? Little Archie, issue 122, a story about books. Sabrina tells Zelda that she has nothing to do, and Zelda says that whenever she feels like that, she goes to the library. The children's part of it is closed, and Zelda wants to do something about it. Zelda finds out that their expenses are up, and they had to close the least used room. Zelda decides to get kids to come in to fix that problem, and somehow Sabrina asks how she's gonna do that, and is worried about her trying to do that with magic. Zelda casts a spell telling magic to send all of her friends to the library, which doesn't include Pop-Tate. A lot of kids show up and get books, but Zelda didn't ask them for any cards, which annoys the librarian because it's like the books were stolen. Why was she trusted to ask them for cards? That was the librarian's job. Hilda casts a spell to make people bring the books back. Why didn't Zelda do that right away? It works, and the story ends with Zelda using magic to make the library look stupid with the name Riverdale Funhouse. And we have to assume that it was worth it from making it more money based on the amount of people that showed up. This story was about Zelda making a lot of kids show up at the library to make the kids' section stop being closed. And for no reason, the librarian didn't think to make the kids check out the books properly, and blamed Zelda for not asking for their cards. That was frustrating. The problem gets undone, and I have to assume that things Zelda did to the library in the end did solve its money problem. But I hate how ridiculous she made it look. Little Archie, issue 123. Real cool. Sabrina's jealous that Veronica has 2 guys after her, even though one of them is Reggie, and thinks that Betty has Jughead. Why does she think that when Jughead isn't her boyfriend? Sabrina's sad that she doesn't have a boyfriend. This would be the most predictable story to introduce Harvey in. It's especially confusing because Harvey was in a little Sabrina story in the 70s comic. He got a witch kit there. She sees a frog and casts a spell on it so that it could tell her what gender it is. The frog suspiciously avoids the question and just tells her to turn into a person to find out. Why would the frog want to become a human when being a frog is all he's ever known? Why would he avoid the question instead of just saying so? She turns him human, he's not a girl in a twist, and he doesn't like his clothes. And she offers to ride a broom to the chocolate shop that the frog apparently already knows about. I guess Sabrina gave him that information along with the ability to speak because it was in her English vocabulary. Despite him not being a witch himself, he arbitrarily says that a broom is old stuff and wants a magic moped. He's also confident that he's the best at driving one with no experience. His confidence reminds me of Reggie. And I guess a part of knowing English because of Sabrina is knowing that witches tend to fly brooms and it's old stuff. He flirts with Sabrina's friends and boasts that he's the best at baseball when he never played it. So knowing English because of Sabrina has to be why he knows about baseball. He lies to them that the girls love him when he steps up to the plate, and Sabrina warps away with him in front of Archie and turns him back into a frog, so she can warp. This story is about Sabrina turning a frog into a boy because she wants a boyfriend, only to hate it because it turns out the frog's an overconfident boaster like Reggie. And I have to assume that the reason the frog knows all sorts of things he shouldn't with only a frog's life experience is that he got that info when Sabrina made him have an English vocabulary. If this was properly taking advantage of him being a former frog, he wouldn't know about the chocolate shop or think to ask for a magic moped for a change. And he would be acting a lot more like a frog. Instead, she might as well have asked a regular guy to go to the chocolate shop. Little Archie, issue 124. Get happy. Pop-Tate kicks Jughead out for owing him $8, and somehow Sabrina doesn't understand Jughead when he says he goes bananas for burgers. Then Veronica says she's got a date with Archie, and that gets Reggie mad. Sabrina feels sorry for him and sees a bully shove Archie because he's the bad baseball player. Sabrina decides to make things better by changing her friends' personalities. Well, she makes Jughead in love with Veronica and she doesn't question it. Archie breaks off his date to go fight with some kids and ends up threatening the bully. Why would Sabrina make Archie like this? Conveniently, Veronica agrees to a date with Jughead, and Reggie asks for a bunch of burgers and gets thrown out. I guess because he didn't have the money to pay for all of it. Jughead surprises Veronica, saying he just wants to get to know her better, while she doesn't appreciate it. So Sabrina changes things back to normal, but because she didn't erase anyone's memories, Veronica cries because Jughead ran away with the burgers. Reggie's running away from the bully, and for no reason her magic didn't turn back everyone. So Weatherby and Grundy have switched to jobs, which Grundy finds relaxing as she sits around eating a donut. This story is about Sabrina trying to make things better for her friends by changing their personalities and thinking that's okay. She turns Archie into a bully for no reason. And despite feeling sorry for Reggie because Veronica didn't have time to date him, she made Jughead his competition for her and made her willing to give him a chance. Little Archie, issue 125. Another World. Sabrina tells a story about an alien planet again. Some aliens are told by the ruler of Zebru to bring back pictures of a human and samples of articles on Earth. And the aliens find humans scary looking after being shown some photos, so they need to get them a greater variety of photos of humans. But they do know what they look like. Somehow the aliens can see the sound effect word when their spaceship blasts off, and we see Archie's friends ready to go trick-or-treating. Jughead's costume is clever because it has a hole in it to keep some onions. Reggie's outfit makes sense for his character, and he wastes time teasing Sabrina about her outfit, and nobody questions it when Sabrina uses magic to summon a gag in his mouth. And somehow he wonders how she did that, even though he just confirmed that he knows she's a witch. Betty sees the spaceship land that happens to resemble a jack-o'-lantern, and assumes that Veronica's going all out for Halloween this year, instead of assuming Dilton made it. There's no sign of Dilton being a genius engineer in Little Archie, so I assume he's not able to do it yet as a kid. Some aliens leave the spaceship wanting to see their leader, and the kids aren't scared of them at all. Probably assuming they're just trick-or-treaters with parents rich enough to afford a spaceship for them. Or they're not phased by aliens because they're used to Sabrina. Sabrina tells the aliens to join them, and Zelda uses magic to summon bags of candy, and nobody questions it. Not even the aliens. I guess they didn't see her summon them because it was behind a wall. And Archie wishes his parents dressed up for Halloween, even though we know by now that they always dress like that. Reggie stupidly wonders if the aliens live in the small spaceship. Why are they gonna leave without being taken to their leader? I guess they assume Zelda's their leader. She just lives in a regular house. There's no security. So the aliens report on trick-or-treating and think that Zelda and Hilda are pretty. Even though what would make them scared of the humans is that they have the colors and shapes of humans. So the ants would still look too human for their liking. And the candy gets put in a planetarium instead of eaten and enjoyed. That is healthier. Who knows what it'd do to an alien? This story is about aliens visiting Earth to bring back photos and samples from it. I didn't see them take photos of Sabrina's ants, but apparently they did. Maybe their eyes were recording them. And the aliens spend a little time with Sabrina's friends when they're trick-or-treating, with them being none the wiser even though they landed a spaceship in front of them. I guess the kids didn't think it would work in space, and they just thought it was an aircraft.